More detail? More detail? Well, fair enough, I suppose. This is our first shot at something a little more in-depth, but still trying to be to the point. Let us know in those comments if you want us to keep it like this, or you prefer the quicker flashes in the pan style we started with. Also, be sure to check out our previous video, how the Lannisters could have won. A little bit more to the point, but then again, so are the Lannisters. Also, hit that like button, and for the love of the Starks, hit that sub button. Be one of the first 1,000. So, they did technically win in the end on all fronts, but my word, the suffering and loss they had to go through to get there was beyond sadistic. So let's rephrase the question. How could the Starks have won the Game of Thrones sooner? Also, I forgot to mention in our Lannister video that we see the game as starting when Ned has alerted everyone to Joffrey's illegitimacy and the starting point for all houses. So no, refusing Bobby B's request to be hand as much as it is the game-winning move for the Starks isn't a valid option. So let's get started. The Starks start in a poorer position than the Lannisters in some ways, but stronger in others. And in typical Northern tradition, let's start with the bad. The Starks believe the Lannisters hold 3 of their household hostage, but in actuality it's just 2, with Arya escaping King's Landing. But the Starks don't know that, and for all intents and purposes, Joffrey is the king in the eyes of the law. Now for the advantages. House Stark's advantages are their location and the fierce loyalties of their bannerman not called Roose Bolton. The Riverlands are automatically loyal thanks to Cat, and the Vale, while on the fence, is also tied to the Starks through blood on Cat's side, and with enough coercion would probably declare for the Starks, although Lysa's infatuation with Littlefinger could be a problem there.
My husband, my sister, they all stood between us and now they're all dead. That's what happens to people who stand between Peter and me.
So we'll just leave them on the table as a wild card. The type of loyalty the Starks inspire is earned compared to forced, and the difference is night and day. We see an example of this in the books where the Northerners are still trying to avenge the Starks even when they think they are gone, versus the Tyrell making all those sneaky power moves once the Lannisters are crippled. The other distinct advantage they have is their home turf. Napoleon and Hitler are real-world examples of what happens when you try to invade a big cold wasteland without adequate experience, preparation, and are facing an enemy who knows how to use the cold to their advantage, while also having castles and being capable of waiting you out. This may not seem like an advantage at first because the Starks are going south, but it's important later when their kingdom is established, they made it home, and retribution may be sought. So how can the Starks win? Their victory conditions are taking their independence and keeping the other factions in a position where retribution is off the cards. And we didn't have to mention this with the Lannisters because they are so ruthless and logical they'll do literally anything regardless of the moral implications, but with the Starks we're going to try and keep them their honorable selves. Let's start with the big moves, then at the end we'll do all those little tidbits to cover our back. Number 1. Make a strong threat and back it up. This is a big one. The odds of getting Ned, Arya, and Sansa all back while still getting that Northern crown are slim to none, but pleading for their safe return isn't going to sway the Lannisters in the slightest. It's a horrible reality to face, but the fact is, strength only often respects strength. So first things first, as soon as they hear about Ned's supposed treason, Robb needs to send a raven straight to Tywin and Joffrey demanding his sister's release and his father unharmed until a fair trial, and let them know that if Ned, Sansa, or Arya is harmed in any way, that any Lannister met on the field by the North, with the exception of women and children, will be killed regardless of surrender, making it clear the Starks are not in the mood to trade hostages and will meet blood with blood if the Lannisters start it. Joffrey will of course still have Ned executed like the idiot he is, and has now justified Robb's retribution. Robb made it clear what he would do, gave them a chance to end it peacefully, at least for now, and they've spat in his face. He can now kill any captured male Lannisters without impeding his own honor. Tywin will likely ignore Robb's threat as the childish ramblings of a green boy who's never seen war, and this is the crucial moment. Robb must make good on his threat with the first Lannister captured and kill them while Tywin is still underestimating him. Unfortunately for Tywin, this is Jaime. Now, I've made a big deal of this one move, so I think it's probably best to explain why. This makes a statement to Tywin and has multiple advantageous effects. It will likely provoke Tywin into rashness and a desire for vengeance. Jaime was his legacy in his eyes. People who are provoked often make rash and stupid mistakes no matter how smart they are. It also makes Tywin more cautious of facing Robb's forces. If he knows Robb is perfectly willing to kill any Lannister encountered regardless of their importance, he's less likely to take the field himself, and he's also less likely to put prominent and, more importantly, capable commander members of the Lannister family like his brother Kevin into the field too. It will also sow discord on Tywin's side, despite it being Joffrey's error. Tywin will be blamed for not taking Robb's threat seriously, and not reining in Joffrey. Losing his son also diminishes his untouchable status, and the fact he couldn't prevent Robb from killing his son also makes him look weak. All he's got as reprisal is doing something to Sansa. And what's going to look better in the eyes of the realm and potential allies as a whole? Executing the Kingslayer after a pretty fair warning, or hurting a child because you're angry? And finally, it will make the Lannisters extremely protective of Sansa. She is now the only bargaining chip he now has. Robb has shown he isn't playing games, and after a few battles, Tywin's learned he can't beat Robb on the field. His only option is to protect Sansa at all costs and de-escalate, while he thinks of a more clandestine approach. If Tywin doesn't protect Sansa, Robb can go full scorched earth on Tywin without fear of reprisal. Also, just so people don't ask, when did they declare Robb king? We're going to say every big move made after this one is post-crowning. Number 2, deal with the Freys. Now most are going to say this is the big one, and that the answer is not to enter into a marriage pact. But what if I told you this is not the logical move? Another important thing to consider is that Robb needed the Freys, or more accurately, he needed the twins and its bridge. The only other option he had for relieving the siege at Riverrun is to go to Lord Manderley and the White Harbour. While we know that Lord Manderley has a fierce, unshakable loyalty to the Starks and would be more than happy to help, he likely doesn't possess the ships to carry a 20,000-strong man host to where it needs to be in time. So how do we solve this while keeping the Starks their honourable selves? Here's the thing, and me and Tom disagree on this a little bit, but we'll get into that. As it stood, Walder's marriage pact with Robb was two-faced from the start. If Robb won, he'd be tied to the victor, and then be related by blood to the king in the north. But if Robb lost, he could just walk away and deny involvement consequence-free. So how do we deal with this flaky at best alliance proposal? It's simple. Call Walder's bluff. Robb agrees to the marriage pact, but insists on the marriage then and there to ensure it's genuine. This puts Walder in an absolute bind. He can't flip-flop, and now either choice forces consequences. The Freys accept, but unlike before, have now legally tied themselves to the Stark's cause. There's no red wedding offer from Tywin because the Freys are now just as big a threat as Robb, as they now have legitimacy to the King in the North status, if the Frey wife becomes pregnant, and also the Riverlands via blood. And Tywin has absolutely nothing to offer Walder now. Well, nothing more significant than he's already got that makes the incurred risk worth it. Or, in my eyes, the more likely scenario, Walder will refuse the offer, exposing his intentions and refusing to aid his liege lord, Hoster Tully, which Robb can now justify has made him for all intents and purposes an oathbreaker, and therefore can be relieved of his castle by force in a way that once again keeps Robb's honour intact. There is some debate about whether or not he's got time to take the twins from the Freys, or whether or not he could take them at all, but this is Robb Stark we're talking about. He knows battle and he's very talented. I genuinely don't put it past him. Just have him send in Ramsay Bolton, who, can you believe it or not, is currently on the Stark side, with 20 good men. He'll get those gates open for you. Either way, the Freys are dealt with in a way that it can't bite Robb on the arse. Now, Tom disagrees with this. He actually thinks that Walder would jump for joy and accept the wedding proposal then and there. So who do you agree with? Do you think my assessment of it's a two-faced offer is correct, or do you think Tom's right and that the problem would be solved if Robb had done the marriage then and there? Let us know down in those comments, guys.
You swore an oath to my father.
Oh yes, I said some words. And I swore oaths to the crown too, if I remember right. Which makes your boy and his corpses to be nothing but rebels, it seems to me.
Number 3. Spend the Boltons. The Boltons have never had good relations with the Starks dating back a long time. They accept the call for no other reason than because to not do so would be a death sentence for the house. When Roose shows up with more men than any other of your bannermen, despite being your most begrudging vassal, even an unwise leader should see it at best as overcompensating, at worst preparation for a coup. What to do about this? Spend them. Roose has brought all these men. Make use of them. put them in the bloodiest fields and justify it with the most obvious statement of, "You've got the numbers to spare, so bloody use them." What can Roose say? "No, I'm saving them to betray you," or "Can't you send Mormont 60? Whittle down the Boltons' forces through attrition and de-incentivize the notion of betrayal, so that if the knife comes to your back, there aren't enough men to drive it past the chainmail. The worst you can do is expose their intention to betray early, while having the rest of the loyal North there to overpower them. Now, Tom also disagrees with this, and rightly pointed out that the Boltons basically did whatever they could to minimize their own losses while maximizing losses for the mainly loyal houses. He thinks a better idea to deal with the Boltons' forces would be to separate them and place them in units under other northern lords. Once again justifying it with, "You've got the numbers to spare." It's kind of the same result but different ways of going about it, so let us know down in the comments which you would do. Number 4. Keep Theon at your side. I don't think this needs a long-winded breakdown of why it's important. Theon is one of the only things keeping a recent bitter enemy from stabbing you full force from behind. Well, I say stabbing, more like pinpricking with how effective the Iron Islands actually are. He's also the only Iron Islander with intricate knowledge of Winterfell. Keep him at your side, and while you won't avoid the Iron Island attacks, you won't lose Winterfell and the family seat. And it's a big deal if you lose your family seat. It is a sign of weakness, and it makes your bannermen less likely to follow your orders.
If we take Tywin's castle from him, the Lords of Westeros will realize he's not invincible. Take his home, take his gold, take his power.
Holding out against a siege is a much greater show of strength than having an Iron Islander inside the keep sat on your throne. Number 5. Leave Cat at home. Mentioned this in our King's video, but Catelyn is far better utilized at home. She's an effective leader and tough as nails, but understandably so, her motherly instincts override the more ruthless decisions that need to be made in battle planning. War sucks, no one can deny that, and sometimes maternal instincts can fly in the face of ruthless but highly effective logic. Also, not starting a sexism argument here, don't start that shit in the comments, but we want to point out that in a medieval feudal society where women are valued less than men, having one even as tough and badass as Cat as your chief negotiator doesn't radiate the strength you need in that kind of culture, much as we love it in our modern day progressive society. At Winterfell, she can coordinate with Sir Roderick and keep the home front safe and stable. She's also out of the picture when it comes to making harder decisions regarding the safety of Arya and Sansa being put at risk, allowing Robb to make more risky moves. Whether or not this pays off is a bit of a guess, but Robb has shown how talented at battle he is. Without Cat there trying to protect him, he may make bolder and more decisive moves. Number 6. Deal with the Baratheons and Dorne. Got to approach this one with some tact, but the fact is the Baratheons, Dorne, and the Starks are the only factions that have a few interests in common. They all want the Lannisters dealt with, albeit for different reasons. The Dornish have made no threat on the north, so they're safe to ignore, and with enemies in common, you're best off just letting them get on with it. It's the Stags we're here for. You have two brothers to pick between. The optimum choice in the short run is Renly. He's kind of fine with your independence goals, and he has the only worthwhile wildcard, the Tyrells, as allies. If you can prevent his assassination, this is game, set, and match for the Lannisters. There is absolutely nothing the Lannisters can do, and the only player left to worry about is Dany. And this is where the short-term payoff leads to long-term problems, but more on that later. Another thing you have to consider with Renly as well is just what he means by bend the knee and homage. If he just wants a symbolic sort of show of respect, I could see the North potentially going for this. But if he actually wants taxes and full-on subservience, Renly may be a problem as well. But how you stop a demon shadow baby from killing Renly is beyond me, leaving us with Stannis. Now, Stannis is the optimum choice in the long run, believe it or not. The absolute best you can hope for is a temporary truce, an enemy of my enemy style of alliance. But make no mistake, Stannis will come seeking his Seventh Kingdom back. But on the bright side, he'll be honest about it during the truce making, and he's also smart enough to know that he needs the North, and honourable enough not to stab them in the back out of nowhere. So, how to handle the situation? Just coordinate your forces with Stannis and divide and conquer. There's no Tyrells to the rescue if they're under siege from the north, and Stannis can sack King's Landing hassle-free. The Lannisters, who are already crippled from Robb's military victories, will have no choice but to either ride to free the Tyrells or ride to save the king. If they pick option 1 after a small skirmish, Robb can retreat, having wasted enough time for Stannis to take the throne and secure the city, in which the Lannisters and Tyrells, sure, they can siege it, then have the North and Riverlands smash into them from behind once they regather. Or, option 2, they can attempt to liberate the city and save the king, but odds of success are slim to none. Tywin wouldn't have wasted time and sought help if he thought his army alone could get the job done. Either way, this is Tywin and the Lannisters' final curtain. After this, they will be wiped off the board as a credible threat, and Joffrey's head will be on a pike. The Tyrells are also backed into a corner, and they'll do what they always do, and side with the winner, perhaps negotiating peace by leveraging their grain supplies. Not sure how Stannis will deal with this, but hey-ho, that's between him and the Tyrells now. Us Starks, we're going home. So, vengeance achieved, honor intact, rightful king on the throne, just some nuisance Iron Island raiders and a few ice zombies to worry about now while Stannis prepares his invasion of your extremely difficult to invade homeland to get his missing kingdom back. Alright, Dany. Number 7, the Endgame. The Mother of Dragons is here, and I'm sorry, but there is no scenario where the Starks make moves to assassinate her. You know, because honor and all that shit. So how to approach this? Well, if they sided with Renly and he capitulated sufficiently on their independence, and they managed to save him from Stannis' demon shadow baby thing, they are in a massive bind. They kind of owe Renly one for siding with them and granting them what they wanted. They'll be honor bound to aid him, and this spells a host of problems. The North itself can repel a conventional army with its climate and terrain, but not dragons. The only thing I can think of is perhaps they can use Jon, the Night's Watch, and the threat of the White Walkers to forestall a war while they all unite and deal with the threat, and hope the dragons don't make it through the conflict. But it's not good odds. Perhaps King Renly and Robb can defeat Dany united, but Dorne is likely to also get involved, and it's basically game over once those dragons take the field. So in this scenario, the Starks will win their vengeance, but their independence will likely be short-lived, and they'll suffer Dany's wrath for siding against her. Dragons are at the end of the day the equivalent of owning nukes while your enemies have none. A potential wildcard to throw into this mix is perhaps Bran. Maybe he could warg one of the dragons and sort of turn them against each other, but after seeing his powers in Season 8, I can't say I'm all too confident about that. But the more likely outcome in our scenario anyway is that they sided with Stannis. The temporary truce will be over and the South will be pressing the North. But it's a fair estimate to say the cold weather and exhaustion of both sides' forces will mean a lack of progress. The North merely needs to hold out. And when the Targaryens return, they are under no obligation to come and defend Stannis, and Dany can, have at it. After this, much like Yara, Robb can ask for his kingdom's independence, perhaps even carefully negotiating a lasting alliance. Dany will not have endured the events that have driven her to madness yet, and she may be amicable to this request. Even if not, the arrival of the White Walkers would force alliance, and perhaps in the bonds of potentially world-ending battle, mutual respect and peace could be reached. This is the best case scenario for the Starks. Like I said, when Dany shows up, it's basically a nuclear power versus a non-nuclear power. Negotiation is all the Starks have. And that's the big ones, but before we wrap up, we'd just like to address some tidbits that are helpful but not necessary, and events that likely won't happen if our steps were followed, just so we, cover our backs. Number 1, the Karstarks won't desert in this scenario. They'll get their revenge through Jaime and every other male Lannister stupid enough to surrender, making the need for dishonorable child murder unnecessary. Number 2, Robb should have clued Edmure in a little more. I know he's a buffoon, but if you're planning to kill the Mountain, best let the guy in charge of those forces know that so he doesn't chase them off, eh? The Mountain's head is a hell of a trophy, and certainly another blow to Tywin's untouchable status. Not needed to win, but certainly demoralizing to the Lannisters. Number 3, Robb won't invite betrayal from the Freys or compromise his honor since he either married one before meeting Talisa/Jane, or the Freys are now part of the dirt and he can marry whoever he likes. Number 4, Sansa should be safe throughout all of this. She has 3 guardians who see her value, that being Littlefinger, Varys, and the Hound. And even the smarter Lannisters like Tywin and Tyrion know she's more valuable as a bargaining chip than a dead example. They would likely probably keep her safe until Stannis took the capital, and I can't see Stannis punishing Sansa, seeing how she's the daughter of the man who died to support his claim. Number 5. With no Jaime, negotiating any kind of betrayal is going to be extremely difficult for the Boltons in the first place, and if the Starks followed our steps, they should hopefully be too spent to stage a coup. Number 6. With Theon on side, Winterfell likely holds, and the Iron Islanders become nothing but a minor nuisance to be beaten back once everyone's home. Which means Bran is going to have to find another way to run away from home to become the three-eyed useless. Number 7, me and Tom disagree on this as well, so let us know who you think is right, but I still think the White Walkers attack. I think the dragon and marking Bran were just nice bonuses that made their job easier. I still think they would march on the wall, and I still think they had a way of getting through. Number 8, assuming everything plays out at the wall roughly the same, so Jon gets stabbed and he leaves, and Sam and Bran somehow find out about his heritage, Robb could potentially use that to negotiate with Dany, perhaps forging an alliance through marriage, maybe legitimizing Jon as a Stark, and sort of using him as a bit of a bargaining chip with Dany, and they can rule the South and, he can rule the North. And number 9 is a massive wild card in the mix, and I just thought we'd give some thoughts on it, and that's Littlefinger. He kind of kept manipulating the war up and down like some medieval version of Darth Sidious. I think if Robb shows enough strength and wins enough battles and shows that he's the clear victor, I don't think Littlefinger's going to try and undermine that. I think Littlefinger sides with the winner at the end of the day, and if Robb makes it clear that that's him, I don't think he's going to stab Robb in the back, at least while he's at war with the Lannisters. And that's our take. What did we miss? Let us know, and what did we get wrong? I'm sure you'll have no problem telling us.